once we've completed. So obviously, as you both know, in order to be a trainer of our curriculum, you have to complete the curriculum that you're looking to be trained in, which would be the recovery coaching in the emergency department training, as well as the TOT program. And so part of what I want to make sure you're all set with today is that you understand all the logistics of scheduling the training, as well as how to deliver the training. And so if at any time, like I said, you have questions, let me know. And if for some reason, you don't get to certain questions, or they don't pop into your head until after this training is over, you guys know how to get in touch with me. I would much rather you get in touch with me and ask me if there's a particular question about a particular module that you're unsure about. Just let us know and we'll help you the best we can. So obviously we want to make sure that we maintain fidelity and that all of the trainings that are delivered, especially this newest training, are all delivered in the same way. We want to make sure that those of you who are training it are going to train it in the same way that you received it, and that your participants are going to have the same experience whether they're in Maryland or they're in Connecticut. And so that's really why we have this TOT program, just to make sure that you understand. Yeah, right? Oh, is there an echo the way that I'm speaking? Okay, so I'm wondering if there's a couple of different speakers going on, because I'm not hearing anything on my end. So I don't know if maybe the computer speakers, and if you're only hooked up to one computer right now. Is it still echoing? Okay. Perfect. So, and you know what? Let me take this microphone off too. For some reason, that might be something weird with this as well. So the other piece, like I said, is I just want to make sure that whoever trains this curriculum understands it enough so that the people that they're training it to have the same experience that they would have when they're here in Connecticut. So each of our CART trainers, obviously, you both know this from attending all of our other training curriculums, we have you sign a trainer's agreement. If you haven't gotten that with your packet, let me know, because I can include it at the end of this training so that you can get that back to us. And again, any questions that you may have, we have our CART number up there, 860-218-9553. You can give us a call at any time. Oh, perfect. Wonderful. So when you're done with this training, if you want to return it back to me, I'll give you our fax number. It's here, let me type it so that you can kind of look back to it too. 860-244-2228. That is a fax number. You can fax it back, or if you want to, I'm not sure. Okay, there it is. Or if you want to take a picture of it and scan it back, whatever you'd like to do, as soon as I have it, I'll forward you your certificates. Perfect. So with the trainer's agreement, as you know, once you go through this TOT program, you are authorized to train this curriculum. We do a TOT program for each of our curriculums. And so if you want to train one of them, you have to go through not only the main program, but also the TOT component. And so this now authorizes you to use this particular curriculum, which is recovery coaching in the emergency department. We ask that you use the official title of this training program with promoting it and consistently referencing CCAR as the originator and the creator. We ask that you refrain from using terms that change the title When your participants come to the training, they're going to see the manual says recovery coaching in an emergency department. They're going to get their certificate at the end of the training once they do the evaluation that says recovery coaching in an emergency department. So we just want to make sure that what is advertised is what they understand they will be receiving. We would like you to use this curriculum in its entirety and deliver it as a whole in the order specified. Just like all of our curriculums, this curriculum was designed to be trained in this specific order, and changing the order would change the intent. So we insist that you train it as is. Each of the manuals are set up as full day sections. So if you decide to break it up into half days, while you may do that, your manual will always be set up in this way. We don't have different versions of the manual. So we always, tell people you may or may not charge people to attend this training, and that's really because we have no idea of knowing if there are different funding sources for different trainings that are being run out there. So we don't dictate what you can charge or if you charge. The only fee to us is the fee for the manuals, as you both know. These manuals cost $30, which includes shipping, and we just ask that you don't undervalue the training. If you are going to be delivering it for free, because let's say an overarching agency has decided to buy the manuals, pay for your time, and all the other pieces that go along with it, that the people in the class know the value that they're getting 12 CEUs, that they're getting lunch and coffee if those things are being included. Only because I know people will, not value the training if they don't put anything into it. We ask that you inform us as to the date, location, and number of people trained. We keep a database and have a record of every single training that's been done. We've asked trainers to inform us of any logistical details through the training request form, which is also on the CD that you have. And the reason being is because if somebody calls and is looking for specific information about a training, we can go right back to that database and we have all that information from you. Sometimes people will say, oh, I saw training on Facebook. I know it's in this state, but I don't know anything about it. We can go to that database, take a look to see who's got a training coming up, and get that person in touch with that trainer. Also, we do occasionally hit milestones as far as numbers go of how many people we've trained, how many trainers we have, how many states we're in. And so all of the pieces that you provide to us help us keep track of all of that data. All CCAR manuals must be purchased from CCAR. You cannot duplicate the manual. The manuals, as you know, are copyrighted, and the cost of the manual does include shipping. So we do ask that you let us know of a training at least 7 to 10 business days. If an order comes in later than that, we will try to work with you to make sure we get it to you as close to your training date as possible. If for some reason things need to be overnighted or what have you, we always work with you and our printer to figure out the best rate to ship a late order. And we would only pass along those charges if they're over and above what we normally charge. You have PowerPoint slides provided with this trainer's curriculum and your training manual. We know that you may need to customize some slides, hiding some and maybe adding some others, but we ask that you don't alter or change the actual presentation. So, and this is just really more of those pieces where if you have a specific agency that you're training and they have a policy or something that they want you to inform folks of, this is where you would do that. Also, if there was a specific agency that was sponsoring the training and you wanted to, do a shout out at the beginning or at the end with a special slide that said thanks to such and such for showcasing or hosting us, you could do that as well. I mean, obviously the C-CART and CART slide logos are on every slide because we are the authors of the curriculum, and so we ask that you don't remove our logos to add other logos in their place. We ask you to provide a list of participants that you train so we can add them to our database. And there is a simple Excel spreadsheet for use on your CD. Also, if you've noticed when training any of our other training programs, Lizanne will email you with a SurveyMonkey link, which I'll get to in a moment, and as well as that Excel spreadsheet, just to remind you of getting that filled out and getting that back into us. And I see you're typing, so I will wait a minute to make sure that you don't have a question before I move on. I'm going to move to the next one. I know it says you're typing, but for some reason, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you know what? I will get those to you. If you want, Tiffany, put your address in the box, because what I'll do is as soon as we hang up, I will put those in the mail for you. And actually, I'll write that down right now because I just got through making some more CDs for folks who ended up registering today for it. So I will put those in today's mail for you. Every time you deliver a CART training, you're required to have all the participants complete an online evaluation. In return, we provide you with a customized training report to help you identify strengths and weaknesses. As you know, we use SurveyMonkey to do our evaluation piece. Thank you. And at this point, you're given a link with your particular class number and that unique link in that email that Lizanne gets back to you. And so we just want to make sure that you know that that is definitely part of this, and that part of your agreement with us is to get that information out to folks so that they can complete the evaluation. They will not get a training certificate unless they do that piece. And so we really want to make sure that trainers kind of go through that process with them. Perfect, Tiffany. I got it written down, and so that'll go out today for you. And you'll get the participant manual, the trainer's manual, and the CD. So you'll have everything that you need. So what obviously CCAR agrees to do is to send all trainers any updates to the curriculum so you always have the ability to work with the latest version. We'll inform you of any ongoing education or training opportunities as it relates to your ability to professionally deliver this curriculum. We will not sell our curriculums. In order to deliver a CART training, one must attend the training and the accompanying TOT program. Each training comes with 1 hour of technical assistance prior to the event and 1 hour of technical assistance post-event. Additional on-site technical assistance may be purchased. Again, we don't charge to have conversations with anybody over the phone. That would just be if you wanted one of us to come down and train with you. Would we need to look at, obviously costs for the time and travel, things such as that. If you have any additional needs, you can always go to our website. a www.addictionrecoverytraining.org. There's a page. We have it hyperlinked there, TOTS. You can get a bunch of information for trainers. All of the links to ordering manuals, registering your trainings, everything is located there. And also there's Lizanne's information, again, for you, so that if you have any questions or need help with setting up a training or what have you, you can get in touch with her. Any questions about any of those pieces? Great. So obviously, as you know, CART issues a certificate of attendance good for 12 CEUs for those who successfully complete this curriculum. Our certificates can be used for certification, but we don't certify anybody. And so I'm sure, as you guys know, there are some states that have certification boards, some states that are still working on certifications. And so if there's a need to figure out what your state might have, there's a hyperlink right there through the ATTC network to kind of take a look to see as to what certifications are in your area. They're really good. They usually try to keep that updated. So as soon as there is a change out in the field, it is updated on their website in regards to certifying peers or recovery coaches. Although we don't certify anybody, we do now have a recovery coach professional designation. We've noted that the CCAR training curriculums have basically become the gold standard, accepted by certification boards, agencies throughout the country, NADAC now, as the training that should be taken by recovery coaches in order to perform the role. And so we've noticed that participants call themselves CCAR trained recovery coaches. And so we really want to elevate anybody who's looking to establish themselves as a professional recovery coach in the field with this designation. So what we ask are for 60 hours of training. Obviously, it would be the 30 hours of the RCA, 16 hours of ethics, and then any other training that pertains to recovery coaching. So it can be our training programs, it could be another training program that you took, but it has to do with recovery coaching. And then the other piece that we ask for is either a resume or essay outlining your experience, and then we conduct an interview that can be done over the phone. And that's just one of those pieces where if people want to be able to have CCAR, like being vetted by CCAR, they can do this process and have that recovery coach professional designation tied to them. It's one of those pieces where there are some states that don't have certification, and so we've had a lot of people that are looking at that as an alternative. Now I'm going to move on to the basics of our curriculum, and as you'll see, each of our trainings are developed with the principles behind adult learning theory, which states that adults are internally motivated and self-directed, adults bring life experiences and knowledge to learning experiences, adults are goal-oriented, we are relevancy-oriented, we're practical, and we like to be respected. And so in the same way that we want to treat recoveries as resources, we also want to treat our participants as resources, and so we always feel that even though we're the ones standing in the front of the room, we're not the experts in the room. The experts in the room are the participants themselves. And so if you think about treating adults in the way that this is stated on this slide, we really are just facilitating a process, and we're allowing the adults in the room to kind of be responsible for their own learning and to bring their perspectives and their experience in order to help kind of expand their knowledge on a specific topic. And so we really try to model that, which really goes in line with the basic recovery coaching principles of asking good questions, managing our own stuff, and actively listening. So I know, Tiffany, you don't have the manual in front of you, but as with most of our training manuals, we do have an overview page that basically shows the breakdown of the day with, you know, the amount of time that should be taken for each piece. Beautiful, wonderful. You know, we kind of give you a guide. As you all know, sometimes things take longer than other pieces. Sometimes things go by quicker. That's where our talent as trainers and facilitators can come in to kind of negotiate time frames, and kind of, you know, continually looking at the time and checking in to make sure that we're still on track so that we're together for 12 hours total. So the timings that are here are listed as a guide. We also give a listing of the page that we're working on, as well as the slides that we will be showing for each module. We always do some introductions with the 2-minute autobiography. So with this, we invite people to give their name, where they're from, what they're doing, and their recovery status. We use this format to introduce ourselves as a model for the way we want participants to introduce themselves, and so this hasn't changed with this training. We share the slide on the learning objectives, which basically gives an understanding of what people should expect to learn by taking this course. So as you'll see, we have that participants in the course will describe the roles and functions of the recovery coach working in the emergency department, understand and practice staying in your lane, develop skills to advocate and educate staff, and patients, etc., as a way to demonstrate accountability within the role. Use of motivational interviewing to bring people through the stages of change into recovery, and to further elevate or develop your art of recovery coaching. And so the next slide that we share is about day 1, and we just give an overview of the agenda. And we're going to go through each one of these a little more closely, so that you can have an understanding of how we deliver that module. The other piece that we do are the working agreements. We do that every single morning. So at the beginning of any training that we have, we allow the participants to build what they see as the set of rules, of which we will all abide by to make a safe, non-judgmental place to be able to share our unique beliefs and values. And so every morning of the training, we revisit them to make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page. There aren't things that we need to renegotiate. And so this just gives us a slide to kind of talk about what our expectations are as trainers. Any questions so far? Great. You'll notice that with this training program, we've allowed and included some slides that are from the voices of actual CCAR Emergency Department recovery coaches. We're not always sure who is going to be in the room as participants, but we wanted to make sure that we had this voice in the room. And so throughout the training, we have a number of slides that we have used to make certain points about certain modules. This is another piece where if you have people working as recovery coaches in emergency departments and you want to ask them like some questions about accountability, you know, if they have a quote, this would be maybe a slide you'd want to shift out for one of your own, for somebody that's actually working in a Maryland emergency department. So the very first small group activity that we do is basically we ask each of the groups to think about, as a recovery coach working in the emergency department, who are you accountable to? And how do you demonstrate that accountability? And then how would you rank this list? There is a page in the participant manual to be able to start doing some of this individually. And then we ask, you know, obviously for folks to call out once we've given them their time in their small groups and we kind of open it up to the large group. We would give everybody a chance to kind of shout out their answers so that we can build a big list. And the reason why is we want to really understand how many people we impact in this role. That it's not just the recovery, it's not just the recovery's family, it's not just our employer or the hospital staff or the hospital or the community. I mean, there's so many people that are watching us, especially in these newer roles where these programs are just being formed, because they want to know, is it worth the money to fund recovery coaching in emergency departments? And so we're accountable to all those people to do our best, because that's what's going to help sustain the funding to continue to have recovery coaches come into emergency departments. Once we have that conversation, we provide a slide on the accountability as defined by Webster's. And then we have a final question of why is this important for emergency department recovery coaches? And then from there, we share a final slide on the impact that we have on the hospital staff, and how it's really important for us to be accountable to those in the hospital as well as the people we serve as our recoveries, to understand that we're accountable to so many people in this role. Any questions about that piece or delivering that module? Great. So next, we review the recovery coach roles. And so this is a slide that we basically took, just one slide from the RCA, and we ask participants around the room to recall what they remember about being a motivator and cheerleader, an ally and confidant. And so you can kind of call on different people to give their definition of each of these roles. And then from there, we want them to think about, in their small groups, what they feel are the top 5 roles that are relevant or the most relevant when working in an emergency department. And so we give each of the small groups an opportunity to kind of think about these 10 roles and to rank them. And then once that time has elapsed, which is usually about 7 to 10 minutes, we bring everybody back and we kind of do a show of hands or people can report out on what their top 5 were in order to make top 5 for the whole class. So once we've gotten the top 5, we are already at our morning break. And so when we come back from break, what we want people to do is to identify a recorder and reporter for our next small group activity. And we want them to think about working in that role of a recovery coach working in the emergency department. For each of those 5 roles, what are the skills and tasks associated with each of those? So in the participant manual, there's a table that says role, and then another side of the table that says skills and tasks, because we really want to think about all the different pieces that a recovery coach needs to do to specifically fill a role in an emergency department setting. So what is it about being a motivator and cheerleader? What are the tasks that we might have to do? Who might we need to be a motivator and cheerleader to? Those are the pieces that we really want to tease out in this section. Any questions about that piece? Great. So we close out that with another slide about recovery coaching. And from here, we're going to head into the next task, which is really developing job descriptions for recovery coaches. And so we want to kind of make smaller groups of 3 to 4 people, just because it'll end up being a lot easier for everybody to get their thoughts across, especially because we want folks to really provide a bunch of different pieces, roles, responsibilities, qualifications. And so sometimes for this activity, having more people working at a table might make it a little more difficult. So we think if you can kind of, at this point, break people up by doing a huddle and mingle, and then having them count off 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then having those groups work on this next piece. And so we basically tell them that you've been tasked with recruiting and hiring recovery coaches for a new emergency department program. We want to know what that job description would look like. And so each of those very small groups of 3 to 4 people are supposed to come up with this job description, thinking about the different skills, tasks, and they should be writing a position summary, qualifications, and a listing of responsibilities. And there is room in the participant manual to do that. And we let them do this piece right up until lunchtime. Obviously, when we come back from lunch, we always take that time to do some journaling, but we head right back into the second part of this exercise, which is really reporting out the work product. So you can kind of do a time check, see if everybody's pretty much all set with their position statement, qualifications, and responsibilities, and then we really spend some time dissecting it. And so you have each group present what they have put together as their job description. We also provide a listing of CCAR's current job description. This is our position summary. If you look in the back of the participant manual, there's the actual job posting that we put out when we're looking for people to work on our Emergency Department Recovery Coach program. This is another slide that if you had your own job description for a recovery coach program that's already in existence and you want to share what that, objective or position statement is, you could do that here. Any questions about that piece? Great. The next piece that we go into is on staying in your lane. And so we want to remind people what a recovery coach is not. And we also read aloud from the document by Bill White that shows the differentiation between a recovery coach, an addictions counselor, and a sponsor, just so people really understand that a recovery coach, especially when working in a medical setting, stays in their lane. People may see them as being more medical staff than recovery coach, and so we really want folks to understand that even though they're in a medical facility, where their line of expertise is should stay in the recovery coaching realm. And so sometimes we need to remind people of that fact, and so we just want to bring it up because in our small groups, we want people to think about how recovery coaches that are working in the emergency department could veer out of their lane. What are those instances that could come up when somebody's working in an emergency department where they might be, veering out of their lane a little bit? Is somebody asking them about medication? Is somebody, is somebody being told, hey, every recovery you see, you need to put them into this detox treatment? What is it that the recovery coaches working in the emergency department are being asked, and how are those things possibly keeping them, out of their lane? And so what we want to do is think about, so once the groups kind of brainstorm their ideas of how emergency department recovery coach could veer out of their lane, we want them to think about, how do we assure that we stay in our lane, and what are those additional supports that can help us? How do we do that we're actually going to, who do we go out to? Do we talk to our supervisor? Do we talk to members of our team? Do we need to meet with hospital staff that keeps us assisting that, we're supposed to be doing this when we know that that's not the role of the recovery coach? We've seen where people are going into emergency departments and doing assessments, like, oh, well, I have a recovery coach here and I don't have to do this assessment, I'll have them do it. Well, that's not really the role of the recovery coach. And so we want to take some time to have this conversation. Oh yeah, believe it or not, We had somebody tell us that they were working as recovery coaches in a hospital, and they had a clipboard and an assessment, and that's what they were having them do. And so I think what the problem is that as people are hearing recovery coaches, so it's like this big thing to have recovery coaches in the emergency departments, but not everybody who's building these programs understands how to utilize us, or understands the limitations of our role and why our role connects with people. So, and so it's kind of one of those things where if they're thinking, oh, well, I have this kind of junior case manager, I'll have them do this piece, and that'll free up some of my other folks to do other things. And that's not gonna work, because that's gonna totally eliminate our potential for reaching people who are there and reaching them with the skills that we have in order to connect them to recovery. So we've heard that it does happen, so this is a really good opportunity to have those conversations, especially because there might be people in your class that are working as recovery coaches. So let's hear from them what they're doing, and have that conversation. Again, using the participants as resources to tease these things out. The next piece that we go into is language of recovery. And so we know a lot of times people talk about those with addiction with really derogatory statements. And so we know part of the reason why we're in emergency departments is to take, that burden off of people who are working, and dealing with emergencies, so that, people who are coming in with, overdose and things aren't treated disrespectfully, so that there's recovery coaches there who can kind of jump in and make sure that, they don't hear some things that are very familiar in the workplace culture. It's kind of one of those things where have find that our coaches are really having to advocate and educate people on recovery, mostly the hospital staff, just so that they understand that, these people are, able to find hope. They're able to become contributing members of society. They just, we need to get them in the best place that works for them, and that's what I'm here to do, and so we've had a lot of instances where our coaches have heard really negative comments being made about the people that they're coming in to help by staff, and so we really want to make sure that we kind of step in, again, accountable to both the recovery and also to the hospital staff, and kind of build that bridge between both. And so one of the pieces that we talk about is language and how we use language, and so we want groups to come up with a list of terms that we should discard and a list of terms to use when speaking about recovery in order to change those attitudes in the emergency department. And so this is another place where we're going to wear that education advocacy hat. So as much as we're that advocate for that recovery, we're also an advocate for the recovery movement. And we're finding that more and more our coaches are changing the culture in the hospitals that they're working in, because they're able to use appropriate language. They're able to, say somebody, oh, we don't really, respond well to people calling us this, that, and the other thing. Why don't you try this? And so we just want people to kind of have some of these positive terms in their toolbox. So if they are providing services in the hospital, they can redirect it into something positive. And so the other slide that we share about this is that, with language, there's a lot of stigma attached. And so especially in the medical setting, people who are coming in with addiction, either substance use or alcohol or what have you, sometimes face neglect, where they've had to wait longer or they receive less attention. They might be denied care, denied treatment, or denied referral to another provider or facility. Also, there's what people say about them. They gossip about their issues, or they scold or blame them. And this doesn't allow anybody to come into a situation feeling positive about a change that they can make. This might leave somebody who's coming in feeling very hesitant to talk to anybody. And especially people who are coming in for an overdose, if they wake up and these are the things that they're hearing about them, chances are they're not going to stay for very long to meet with somebody to get the help that they need. And so we need to turn this around in any way, shape, or form that we can. This is a role that we can serve to help kind of, again, bridge that gap and help change some attitudes. And so this is another quote that we use to kind of close out this discussion. And from here, we have another opportunity to do some skits. Our emergency department recovery coach theater, we ask small groups to demonstrate a situation where a recovery coach is coming into emergency department where the attitudes about the recovery are extremely negative. And so we want to see a recovery coach, maybe family members, nurses, doctors. We want to see all those kind of attitudes and things come up so that we can see how our recovery coach might turn that around. And so that really will help demonstrate a lot of the learning that we've reviewed over the day today, in order to review the different roles that recovery coach, those hats that recovery coach might wear, how that recovery coach stays in their lane, and the different language that they can use in order to help shift some ideas and some attitudes about recoveries. And that's how we end day 1. So we do give some time for pluses and wishes. Are there any sections that you can think of, if you look back, that you might have difficulty training during this day? Wonderful. So I will move on to day 2. As you know, the beginning of the day is spent doing some huddles and mingles, just to kind of make sure people have a clear understanding of where we left off and where we're going to be going to over the next day. And so it really helps to connect the learning from the previous day to the present day that we're in. And so we give them an opportunity to do a few huddles and mingles, and we look at some of the modules that we looked at last time. So we might ask questions about accountability, looking at the different recovery coach roles. What does it mean to stay in your lane? How important it is to understand the language of recovery and using positive language. And so we bring some of those things forward with our huddles and mingles format. And then from there, as you know, we give an overview of the learning objectives once again. We provide an overview of the agenda. And again, we look at the working agreements to make sure that they're on point and everybody still feels comfortable and safe to share their own personal beliefs and values when it comes to this particular training. The next piece of the agenda really moves us into looking at some skills that recovery coaches will utilize when working in an emergency department. And so we really want to spend some time reviewing motivational interviewing principles. So we give everybody a brief understanding of each one in the same way we did with the RCA. So we go through and we have a slide, as you can see here, on each of the principles. And we review those. Those sometimes are nice to have other people from the participants to read each one of those slides, just so you're not having to talk through that whole thing. But this leads us into a small group exercise. And so in our small groups, what we want are people to think about the different principles. And so you might have different stations set up around the room. You might have people use Post-it pads and have them move them from table to table. But you want a station or a Post-it pad for each of the principles. And then you want the participants to share their sample statements. So in the RCA, we provided some, this is how, hey, I see you want to do this, but you keep talking about doing this. How do we develop discrepancy? That's a way that we might do that. That's a sample statement that we might make to somebody in order to do that piece of motivational interviewing. Well, in this activity, we want all the participants to come up with their own sample statements and questions for each principle. And we spend a great amount of time doing this. And you might find, depending on how many terms people come up with in the first couple of rounds, like maybe you have, 10 or 12 minutes for people to go through the first couple of stations, then you might want to lessen it or take a kind of walk around and make sure that people are having conversations and things, just because as they get to some of those later stations, they might be completely filled in and there may not be much to add to it. And that's just, again, as you facilitate, you can kind of take, a temp check just to see, what makes the most sense. But you really want to give each of the groups time to look at each of the stations and give their comments and ask questions and provide their sample statements for each. What we do at the end of this is we report out and give people an opportunity to kind of walk around the room and take a look at all of them. This is basically where some people will get some tools to put in their toolkit. I may have never thought about asking a question like that, but that makes so much sense. And now I can remember that next time when I'm working with somebody. And once everybody's kind of done with that whole piece and back in their seats, we give them an opportunity to review the sample statements and questions from the RCA. So I'll just go through a couple of these slides now. Any questions about this motivational interviewing piece? Great. So we move on to stages of change. And in this piece, we really talk about how quickly it is to move someone who comes into an emergency department setting through these stages. When we're working with somebody as a recovery coach who voluntarily comes into a recovery community center, they may still be thinking about, they actually walked in the door, but at the same time, like, how ready are they to make this change? Sometimes in an emergency department, we may get people who came in on an overdose, and by the time they're done with their conversation with us, we've already found a bed because that's what they wanted, and we've moved from contemplation to action really quickly. And so we want people to really think about the stage of change process, because even though it goes fast, we do go through each of the stages as we're working with people. And so for this module, we review the table that we had used in the RCA that really shows what happens from stage to stage, but instead we left the final column of the table blank, where it asks for the tasks that a recovery coach would need to do to get somebody to move from pre-contemplation to contemplation, and from contemplation to preparation, and so on and so forth. And so we want the participants to come up with what those tasks would look like. And again, this could be something that's done on an easel pad. There is space in each of the manuals but we want them to present this out as far as reporting out, because again, it could give people some additional tools for their toolbox so that when they are working in this role, they can really be sure of what they might need to do to get someone to move from one stage to the next. Once we have that big, we have the small group working on it, and then we have a conversation in the large group, we go through and we provide what the RCA said was the coach's role from each of the stages, just to kind of reinforce some of the learning that probably came out while we were talking. And so as you see, we kind of go through all these pieces, and then we're already into lunch. Any questions about any of that piece? Great. We do some additional huddles and mingles, and a lot of this is really, again, we want to do the huddles and mingles to get people up and moving around, but also changing tables. And the reason why is because, as I stated, you might have some people that are already working in an emergency department, or maybe you have some people that are thinking about building a recovery coach program, or who currently have a program working. And so we really want to give people that opportunity to sit with a bunch of different folks throughout these 2 days so they can get some exposure to everybody and have those different perspectives at each table. And so, again, after lunch, you do the journaling and then some huddles and mingles. You can do a round for the motivational interviewing piece, maybe one for the stages of change, or, you know, their biggest takeaway from the morning, whatever it is, just to get them up and kind of out of their seats, and then change up the table groups. So now we kind of look at how we actually do the work in the emergency department. What are the actions that we take? And so in order to kind of get us focused on really performing the role of recovery coach in an emergency department, we want to think about some of these big picture questions. So we will ask the group, what is the main objective of the emergency department? What is our goal as coaches? What have we learned so far in the training that's helped us reach that? How do we connect people to recovery, and how do we move from resistance to opportunity? And so this is really where we're thinking about what are those tasks and things that we came up with on the first day, and some of those questions that we, you know, came up with in motivational interviewing of how we move people from one stage to the next. This is where we really want to think about how we do those things. So we really want to focus on 3 of the roles of the recovery coach, because in working with our emergency departments, we've seen coaches wearing these 3 hats most of the time in their roles. And so we looked and spoke about a recovery coach as advocate, a recovery coach as motivator and cheerleader, and a recovery coach as resource broker. And so we want to dive into these a little further, and if you'll notice, there's a slide for each one. And so in their small groups, we would have, somebody read this slide, and then we would instruct them to answer the questions as a small group in their manual on page 27. So it says, how do you see yourself working in the role as an advocate in the emergency department? Who are you advocating to? What might you need to do to get buy-in from hospital staff, the local community, etc.? And so those are the pieces that we want people to think about when they're working in emergency department. And so in their small groups, what does that look like? And then from there, we do the same thing for motivator and cheerleader, and resource broker. And then we practice. So once we've gone through those 3 roles, again, giving each small group some time to wrestle with those questions and then having a conversation, we bring people together and we have them practice. And so you might have people pair up and one person would be the recovery coach, and one person would be the social worker in this first scenario. And then the same thing for the second scenario. Somebody would be the recovery and somebody would be the recovery coach about how to talk to their family. Again, it gives a nice opportunity to think about the advocate hat, the motivator and cheerleading hat, and the resource broker hat. Any questions about that piece? In the next module, we really look at developing your art of recovery coaching. And the reason being is because if you notice throughout the last 3 days, we really count on the participants to bring their gifts to this conversation. What are the questions that they ask during the different pieces of motivational interviewing? How do they bring somebody from stage to stage? How do they have that conversation with that social worker? That's all about the art. And so when we think about the science would be the stages of change model, it would be the principles of motivational interviewing, but how we do it, how we actually think about asking those questions is really the art. And so in order to reinforce this piece, we have folks read a blog by Phil Valentine, which was written back in February. And this is basically a blog that focuses on an occurrence that happened in an emergency department. And so it's really how one of our coaches went in and basically used his art of recovery coaching to reach somebody when medical staff was pretty much had given up all hope on this person. And so we want people to think about that blog and what that speaks to about using your art of recovery coaching. And then from there, we have folks think about the gifts that they bring to the table as a recovery coach. You know, what do they bring to the role? You know, maybe it's their training, maybe it's their experience, maybe it's having a family member, you know, whatever it is. And then how would they define their art? What would they say about it, is about performing the role of the recovery coach? And then the biggest thing that we always want to make sure that people are thinking of is, obviously, people are here to do a training, to receive some professional development. Maybe they're here just to get CEUs or to be trained as a recovery coach working in the emergency department to get a job. But we really look at learning, and especially as recovery coaching, as ongoing. And so we want people to think about next steps and what does it mean to practice your art, and how will when I practice, how will that help me in my job more effectively? And how do I write a SMART goal for myself in order to hold myself accountable for further developing my art of recovery coaching? And so in some cases, you can take the time to have people write their SMART goal and share it with a partner if you have enough time. Or if you're looking and it's getting close to the end of the day, you could have everybody share their goal as a way to go around the room and close out the training. Any questions about that final piece? Wonderful. So we close up. We have a couple of slides that just talk about our experiences working as an EDRC, and these are a couple of slides. We can give our own final thoughts, ask for questions or comments. You're both very familiar with ending an RCA, so this pretty much goes the same way. We don't have a closing exercise, so to speak, the way we do in the RCA, but this really, we just want to give people some time to make any final comments about their experience. And then from there, as I mentioned earlier, we just want you to review the evaluation instructions with the participants. And so, as you know, when you submit your training request form, Lizanne sends you an email that has the surveymonkey.com email or web address with EDRC and a 4-digit number. We give you a class number, and we need you to provide that to your participants. And also we have on this slide that after 2 hours, if they visit www.recoverycoachacademy.us, they can download and print their certificate. We always ask for folks to kind of go through this process, but we added a slide here so that it makes it easier for you to remember to kind of walk people through that as well. If you get questions, I know sometimes people don't always go in right after the training to do that. If anybody is having any issues, you both know that you can forward them to us and we'll help them figure it out, especially if it's something that you're not able to help them with. Or if it's been months since the training has happened, sometimes the evaluation link is expired, and so we have to go them and give them another way to get into it. So, any questions about the evaluation piece or any of those instructions? Great. So the last piece just to share with you is in the back of the participant book, we have, obviously, as I shared earlier, on the first day, we have the emergency department recovery job description. We also have a little template, your first meeting with a recovery, and that's just a resource that some of our emergency department staff came up with just as a way to kind of think about some things, what that might look like, especially if you have people that are new to working as an emergency department recovery coach. The other piece that we have in here, which I think is really helpful, is a listing of terms from the Surgeon General's report back in November. He did the report on alcohol, drugs, and health. And so there was a glossary of terms which would help somebody who's working in a medical setting for the first time to kind of understand what it is. Oh, good, I'm glad. Sometimes, especially when you're dealing with medical staff, they speak in terms and jargon that we aren't always familiar with, which is fine, but now we have a place to kind of go and look. As well as there's also the list of acronyms that people might be using as well. And those were all listed in his report. And on the very final page, we have basically our CCAR Emergency Department Recovery Coach Program overview. And it basically just gives an understanding of what our program looks like, how we schedule it, what we look at for training. Really, at this point, kind of gives a really nice snapshot of what our program looks like, which could be valuable for anybody who's looking to do their own. So now I leave it to see what questions you may have. So if there's anything about any of the different modules that we covered that you feel unsure about, or any concerns that you have about the curriculum, or even how we can better support you, now's the time to ask. Wonderful. So again, what I will do is I will send you both a recording of this. I'll also send you these slides because it has all our red comments and points that you may want to make if you need to go back and review it. And then when you get me back your agreements, I will forward your certificates. So if there's nothing else, I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Great. All right, bye guys. Thank you guys for attending. I really do appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out.